Hey everyone, Sean here, and welcome to the 13th episode of my quarantine-induced web series, Old T-Shirt Tuesday. Back in the early to mid 1990s, I got involved with a theater company in Boston called Centa Stage. That's Centa, with a Boston accent, not center. The group was co-founded by two great guys, Joe Antone and John Schumacher. Over the course of a couple of years, I did 3 shows with them. The first one was a fun musical western called Big Sky. It's about cowboys and things. Yep, that was the full title. Big Sky, and then in parentheses, it's about cowboys and things. I played the somewhat hapless Deputy Dodge. My sister Mary was the director, and it really was a lot of fun. The second show I did with them was a bit of a bohemian, all colors of the rainbow, let's tackle some big social issues kind of play called One Is, the Other Isn't. I played a guy trying his best to be Buddhist. I don't remember the name of the character anymore, but I do have a few random photos from rehearsals and behind the scenes. The third show I did with them was the most intense of the 3. I played a department store detective named Hal, I think it was, in a play called For Want of a Name, written by Dean O'Donnell and directed by Kimberly Ferris. In a nutshell, Hal works for a store, and it's his job to catch shoplifters and all other types of criminals who are trying to rip off the store. He works with a female partner, and if I'm remembering right, the two of them are having an affair. Which of course complicates the plot. Well, they end up taking a suspect into custody and then discover that he has a whole bunch of fraudulent credit cards on him. So it looks like he's a much bigger criminal than they originally thought. Well, Hal, who wishes he was a real detective, takes his job way too seriously and sees this as an opportunity for him. Well, he roughs this guy up, who's actually much bigger than he is. In the back room of the store, and he interrogates him, and he just keeps him there much longer than he should. The suspect claims to be diabetic and in need of medication, but Hal doesn't believe him. And eventually, the guy dies in custody. Needless to say, Hal and his partner are now in really big trouble. I really enjoyed playing that role. And I'd like to thank Joe Antone and Centa Stage for providing me with several of the photos that you've just seen. Unfortunately, I also have 2 unpleasant memories associated with that show. I had always taken pride in knowing my lines forwards and backwards. But in one performance, shortly before intermission, I completely blanked on a line. I could not remember what I was supposed to say, and I couldn't even fudge my way out of it. That had not happened to me since I was probably a young teenager. My fellow actor, Leslie Arnott, who was playing the other detective, could see it on my face. She knew I was lost, and the line that I was supposed to say wasn't a line that she could say because it would have made no sense for her character to say it. Thankfully, she was able to get us out of the rut by jumping ahead to another line in the script. The downside was that we ended up skipping probably about 5 pages worth of dialogue. Pretty important dialogue from what I remember. Well, we got through the scene and made it to intermission, but I was seething inside. We exited the stage, and as we were entering the dressing room, I remember picking up the first thing I saw and just throwing it across the room. I was so angry with myself for putting us in that position. I don't remember exactly what the object was that I threw, but it just hit the wall directly in front of me. I didn't throw it in the direction of anybody, but it did startle everyone in the room. My fellow actors calmed me down, and then we went out, and Act 2 went off without a hitch. The second unpleasant memory was a lot more painful. My awesome cat Zorro, who I'd had since I was probably 10 years old, passed away. We'd had a lot of cats in the house, but Zorro was mine. He had been diagnosed with a cancerous tumor inside his nasal passages. When he would sneeze, a tiny little bit of blood would come out. It didn't seem to cause him pain, and it wasn't really operable. because he was already 15 years old and had a heart murmur. During the run of the show, my normal routine was to come home from work, eat dinner, get dressed, and then head into the theater in Boston. Well, on this particular evening, after I got home from work and I was getting ready, I happened to notice Zorro lying on this Canadian rocker chair that we had. And there was blood all over the cushion right in front of his face. The tumor had obviously ruptured. I was crying and I didn't know what to do. He was still alive, still breathing, but in pain and not moving. The vet had told me that this is what would likely happen and that there wasn't anything they'd be able to do. There were no understudies for the show. I had to go to the theater. So I told my parents and my brother Tim just to keep an eye on him, and if it looked like he was suffering too much, to take him to the vet and have him put to sleep. Weirdly, I had one of my best performances that night. I must have been in some kind of a zone. I remember my friend Jerry came to the show that night because as soon as the show was over, I said a quick hello to him in the lobby and then made a beeline to the payphone. I called home to find out how my boy was. And my brother Tim told me that they were going to bring him to the vet, but that as soon as they tried to move him, he died. I lost my shit right there in the lobby. I could not stop crying. And I didn't care. Half of our audience was there and could see me sobbing, but it was uncontrollable. Not that it had anything to do with it, but that ended up being the last show I did with Center Stage. I worked with other groups on other shows and eventually started working more in film than in theater. And although they have significantly altered their format, Center Stage still exists. Instead of doing a 3-show season, now they workshop one play until it's ready to be presented to the world. So they're still doing good work after all these years. Well, that's it for this episode, but before I go, you should know that I'm almost out of old t-shirts, at least old t-shirts that have a good story behind them. So on that note, there will only be 2 more double t-shirt episodes, and then that will be it. In the meantime, I wish you all a nice and safe Thanksgiving, and I'll see you next time.